Well, we know from Kamala, the wife to the heir of the throne, that Joe Biden has difficulties with flatulence on high state occasions. We know from sources close to His Holiness the Pope that Joe Biden had a toilet incident in the Vatican, which detained His Holiness rather longer than had been scheduled, as they sought to put the President of the United States back together. During the week, for a brief period, he was no longer the President of the United States. That high office passed to a woman who got less than 1% of the Democratic Party's vote in the primaries when she ran in the presidential primaries just a couple of years ago. She was, for a minute or two, an hour or two, the most powerful person in the world, elected by nobody and trusted by only 27% of the American public. Joe Biden's ratings are low, but nowhere near as low as his vice president and putative successor, if he has to go under the knife again, or if indeed he's held under the US Constitution to be no longer a fit and proper person to exercise his high responsibilities, which, from where I stand, can only be a matter of time. And as we heard from Garland Nixon last week, she then gets to pick her own vice president. If it's an unelected person, they have to pass muster in the US Senate, apparently. That probably rules out Hillary Clinton, who might otherwise have fancied the job, but would it rule out Mrs. Obama? Yeah, you think that's left field? You should see some of the other suggestions. The Prime Minister of Britain, on the other hand, though he can scarcely scratch his backside when it comes to the great issues of state that Britain currently faces, the multiple crises, as Mr. Macmillan said, events, dear boy, not one damn thing, but one damn thing after another, is now facing a police investigation into the matter of an American blonde bombshell, a Miss Jennifer Arcuri, who was, it seems clear, a mistress of Boris Johnson when he was mayor of London. That would be a matter for him and whichever wife he was married to at the time, ordinarily, and I wouldn't be bringing it up. Except it is a matter of public record that Miss Arcuri received vast sums of money from the public purse in London to which she may not have been entitled. Moreover, was flown to trade fairs across the world with the mayor, in the airplane with her, not necessarily sharing a hotel room with her. I wasn't there, don't know, and don't much care. But the police are interested in whether all of this constituted corruption. Now, on the scale of British government corruption, it's very small beer indeed, though it is a six-figure sum, a high six-figure sum. On the track and trace fiasco that Britain faces, more than £32 billion have been, as he would put it, faffed up against a wall. People have been given contracts for things that they had never done before. And those people, coincidentally, turned out on an embarrassing number of occasions to be previous high-level donors to the Conservative Party. Some of them turned out to be relatives of Conservative ministers, some even relatives of the actual minister in the Department of Health giving out the contracts. The sleaze allegations against the Conservative government and Boris Johnson's premiership would take me all night to adumbrate. Everybody, I think, knows that billions of pounds of British taxpayers' money was spent at least criminally negligently, and at worst, criminally. And one day, the accounts will have to be settled on these things. But that would just be one damn thing if that's all that Boris Johnson was facing. In fact, it's one damn thing after another. He was at it again today, booming like a boisterous show pony, as Tom Gallagher put it on social media today. Professor Tom Gallagher, a man of the right, a conservative, who has been remorseless in his critique of Boris Johnson's premiership. He was booming today, was Boris. Booming about some woke issue or another, the need to get more women into public office. Well, he might have to make way soon on that front to one of several women vying for his position. Last week, he was zipped up in a polar bear suit, not hugging a husky, becoming a husky, as he lectured the rest of us of how we'll have to shower in cold water and get used to a colder Britain because we can't afford boilers. We'll have to pay £20,000 each in order to replace it with something he called a heat pump. No evidence that heat pumps actually work, at least as well as a boiler, and no clue as to how ordinary people in Britain are going to afford £20,000, all in the interests of greenness, save a husky. He thinks that that is the profile of a Conservative Prime Minister. But conservatism is judged actually by other things. And one of the things that it's judged by is whether or not it is securing our border. As I said, I hope forcefully last week, Britain now has military forces in Poland defending the Polish frontier, while our own frontier is pierced by thousands of people every single week. In one day last week, more than 1,200 people in a single day. Some of them end up under supervision of a kind in a three-star hotel. Three-star hotels all over the country are now full of them, but many of them evade those who would take them to a three-star living and make it into the general population. Nothing happens to them. They are never found. They are never returned. They are never deported. Last year, only 5 people who arrived illegally into Britain from the European Union were deported. 5 people out of 20,000 people. 5 were returned. And of course, even when they fess up, as the would-be massacre of the innocents at the Liverpool Women's Hospital last week, almost discovered in an event of mass destruction. Even when they fess up and apply for asylum and are then refused asylum, 7 years later, they're still here. And in the case, I'm not going to say his name, I won't glorify it in any way. In his case, the man who blew himself up in a Liverpool taxi had even been arrested and sectioned under the Mental Health Act for running around the streets of Liverpool with a large machete in his hand. Even then, he wasn't deported. He was allowed to go through a farcical conversion to Christianity to make it more difficult to deport him back to the Middle East, where, of course, you're not allowed to leave Islam and convert to Christianity. So, ipso facto, you'll have to allow me to stay here because, hey, I've become a Christian. although many reports suggest he was actually with that bomb, originally intending to attack Liverpool Cathedral, where he supposedly converted to Christianity. He was on his way to blow it up. Such were the strength and commitment to Christianity. So this is the crisis, above all, that will do for Boris Johnson. You cannot be a Conservative Prime Minister and shrug that you can do nothing about thousands and thousands and thousands of people you don't know, mainly young men of fighting age. In the case of the Polish frontier, I can tell you with absolute accuracy, the vast majority of the would-be migrants on the Belarus-Poland border are not fleeing our bombs. They're Kurds from Iraq. There have been no bombs on Iraqi Kurdistan in more than 30 years. In fact, Iraqi Kurdistan is a Western protectorate. Whatever else it is they're fleeing from in Iraqi Kurdistan, it's not bombs. It's not war. Because in Iraqi Kurdistan, there has been no war. They're fleeing Iraqi Kurdistan because they want a better life in Europe. Why they want to come to Britain, I'm not quite clear. I was just talking to our editor outside who made the point to me that benefits in the European Union for such migrants claiming to be political refugees is actually higher than it is here. Maybe it's our weather they're coming here for. Maybe it's our hug-a-husky government that they would like to live under. But whatever the reason, the great majority of people fleeing France and Belgium are not under any threat in France or Belgium. Now, for clarity, let me make clear, every country has a moral and legal right to take its fair share of refugees. It is outrageous that Italy and Greece and Spain are having to take far more refugees than countries who did far more to destabilize the world, like the United States and Britain. But we can't do it in this nihilistic way of whoever can get on a 50-foot rubber dinghy and evade the customs people on the beach can melt into the British population, not least because some of them, probably a tiny handful of them, may have come here to hurt us, like the man that blew himself up in a Liverpool taxi. Others, again, a tiny handful of them, may become involved in crime, as happens from time to time, as will happen in the environs of these 3-star hotels to which these people have been distributed. And when, not if, that does happen, whatever kind of crime it is, there'll be trouble with the local population. And that trouble with the local population will cost Conservative MPs their seats. And I'm a living witness to the brutal nature of the Conservative Party in Parliament. I saw the defenestration of the great she-wolf herself, Margaret Thatcher, untouchable, the Iron Lady. They threw her, metaphorically speaking, from a third-floor window just as soon as they concluded that holding on to her would lead them into something worse. I saw the brutal way that Conservatives tried to get rid of John Major, as mild a mannered an individual as you can imagine, was reduced to talking about the bastards in his own cabinet. His word, not mine. He famously talked of the bees in his own cabinet that were constantly seeking to overthrow him. In fact, he was comprehensively overthrown anyway in the 1997 general election, and a very large number of Conservative members of Parliament had cause to rue the day that they didn't get rid of John Major earlier. And that's why I'm predicting to you that Boris Johnson will for not much longer be the Conservative Prime Minister of Britain, because he isn't a Conservative at all. He's a Blairite, just like Keir Starmer, just like Ed Davey, who I hear you ask, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, the third party in Britain. This Blairite consensus, utterly woke, utterly green, every pronoun carefully enunciated, has no idea how to stem the flow of crises now engulfing the British government. He'll be gone next year if he isn't gone this year. That's my prediction. And this coming week, Ghislaine Maxwell, daughter of the late Robert Maxwell, the publishing magnate, the bouncing check, appears in court in New York.